Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 30 of the Crickpicks podcast. I'm Behram, who you can find at DefMango on Twitter. With me, as always, is Estelle Vasudevan to my right or left, depends on where you're sitting. And you can find her at Estelle_Vasude, the number 1 on Twitter. And once again, filling in for Jared Kimber as an impact sub for a third week on the bounce is Rob Barron from Cricket 8, who you can find at Monsieur Judge on Twitter. And we've had some fun ones, in the last 2 episodes, some fun battles, Estelle and Rob. This particular topic that we have at our hands today is rather challenging. It is the best super overs in the history of cricket. So lots of research required, but also some memories on the top of our heads. I've gotten like a good 7 to 8 super overs that I remember vividly. Apart from that, this was really challenging. How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, I hope people aren't like, we don't pick all the same ones and then we're stuck with nothing to pick in the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, 15 super overs, huh? That is a long list. Did you struggle, Rob, or does this like come as a second nature to you?
He's going to pick like 5 from the blast, right?
Yeah, they're all T20 Blast. Yeah, that's the right, or whatever it was called before it became the Blast. The Friends Provident T20 and the T20 Cup or whatever it was called.
Friends Life T20.
That was
like
it.
That
yeah,
as
the
well.
Friends Life. Yeah, well remembered.
Yeah,
I can name a few, but I have a feeling that we're going to name a lot of the same ones. I've been really lucky in my cricket watching career that I've been to 5 matches that have ended in ties. And one of them was handshakes, and well done, we get a point each. And then I've seen bowl-offs and super overs, and I've never seen a double super over, and that's my dream. But I'm sure we'll come on to that in a minute.
Yep, and I'm feeling very, very fortunate and lucky that I've actually gotten first pick for this particular episode. And that is why I'm going to start with the obvious one. But before that, just to give you guys a quick refresher, for those of you who haven't seen this show before, the way this draft works is that it's a snake-style draft competition. So the pick order goes 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And I have secured pick number 1 for this one. ODI World Cup Final 2019, right? Boundary count, the infamous super over. England scored, New Zealand initially scored 241. England were going brilliantly, then kind of lost the plot, and Ben Stokes played one of his first clutch knocks, right? Headingley came after that. The T20 World Cup Final came after that. But that final in 2019 was where, clutch Stokes was kind of born. And he scored, 84 not out in the regular game. Got those runs diving into the crease as well when the ball hit the bat. So there was drama. His catch got like dropped, or Trent Bolt kind of put his foot on the boundary rope by mistake. So there was a lot going on in that game. England, I felt like should have even won it in regular time, but they somehow scampered to 241 and took the game to the super over. And that super over was intense as well. I mean, Stokes and Butler came out to bat for England. They got 14 runs, something like that? I think it was 15.
15.
I can't quite remember correctly. Yes, so that was quite healthy as well. But then when Jimmy Neesham came out to bat with Marty Guptill, he slammed a 6, and they were taking a lot of 2s. And then on that final delivery, they couldn't, and Guptill was run out. And there's that scene of Joss Butler, literally diving into the stumps, and Ian Smith on comms.
Barest of
margins. Barest of margins. An unforgettable moment in cricket. I would say the best ever final in all of cricket, all formats combined.
Apart
and it's really
from the
unfortunate
result,
that
right?
it had to. Yeah. I know Rob might disagree, and of course these things are agreed upon pre-tournament, but it did feel like a massive dampener when that game was decided on boundary count. And then, they went on to change that law as well. You would have multiple super overs after that. So I think it was iconic. When you think of super over, that's what comes to mind. And yeah, I don't really know what else to add. Everything has been said.
When I said, like, apart from the result, I meant that England winning wasn't, like, great, but it
Yes,
did
it was.
force a change of rules, right? I mean, things had to change, and I mean, there are a lot of people who talk about how unfair or fair it is. I think if you agreed to the conditions, even though you can't imagine something like that happening, then you can't really make a fuss about it, right? And I don't think New Zealand have it. It was just, such a heartbreak coming that close,
Yeah.
inches. And I mean, you spoke about the overthrow when Stokes was batting, which
Yep.
again was argued whether it was the right decision by the umpire Kumar Dharmasena, and all that. So yeah, the iconic super over.
Absolutely. And I mean, Jimmy Neesham is still upset about it. I'm not sure if sending Marty Guptill, who was a man woefully out of form, to bat in the Super Over was a good idea. Maybe that cost New Zealand. But, on another day, there would have been a fumble. They would have completed that run. And as shitty a law as boundary count was, it was still there in place prior.
Yeah.
So we can't really say anything. Although, back in the day, tied games were decided by a number of wickets fallen. That makes more sense to me. Boundary count does not make sense to me. But I'm sure, Rob, you have a lot to add over here.
Yeah, well, New Zealand knew that they needed 5 off 3 with a guy that had just got 8 off 2 at the crease. And they knew that was the rules or the laws or whatever you want to call it. And they didn't get that many. There was nothing stopping Guptill hitting the last ball for 4, and that's the end of that. No one needs to remember all the... But the best way to win, I was there, from an Englishman's point of view, is that you win in a way that pisses everybody else off. And they literally change the rules, so you're not allowed to win like that ever again. No one will ever do that ever again. Win a tied super over to win the tournament. If you'd have said, how would you like to win this tournament? Now, I'm sure you guys will know this when you go and watch cricket with your friends that don't watch it quite as much as you get asked lots of questions. And I got asked by at least 20 people, what happens if this super over ends in a tie? And I was like, I don't know. How am I supposed to know that? I've got no idea. And it kept, we were like, what's happening? Because when you're there, you never get as much information as you get when you're watching it on telly or listening on the radio. And it was like, actually, the tie's good enough. And then obviously we all went mad. But the reason why that was such a good super over, and it's probably going to end up being the best one, is context. There's been loads and loads of super overs I've watched. I've watched an extremely unhealthy amount of cricket. And a lot of them are forgettable because the game didn't mean anything. Some meaningless Big Bash game halfway through the season. I went to a Big Bash game that finished in a tie. It was really fun, but no one's going to remember it. But this one, it had loads of mad stuff happened to cause the super over. Don't get me started on Ben Stokes because he actually nearly threw the game in the bin. His whoever writes his scripts does very well. A very well managed man, Ben Stokes. But it had everything in the hour leading up to the super over, and then the super over itself was amazing. It had everything. It had a 3 in it.
Yeah.
It had Jimmy Neesham playing a ridiculous, what was it, over the short boundary, just picked one up and hammered it into the stands. And at that point, they need 7 off 4, and a bloke's just hit a 6, and Archer's first ball was a wide, and he was really young, and you think, oh, wow, never mind, we've done it again, because it's a very English thing to lose a close one. But yeah, it was great, and because it had the most context it could have, or the biggest context it could have, being the World Cup final.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the right place to start, Behram.
Yeah, the stakes were as high as they could be. I think it would have been unanimous. No one else would have picked a different game. Yeah, those ones are fun, but not really. They are the obvious ones. But for this particular episode, I don't mind, because the super over debate is tough. Anyway, Estelle, you've got your first pick
my
now.
one. Okay, so I think we've gotten the only obvious one off the list, right? I think from this point onwards, the order in which you place them will probably differ. I'm going actually with Netherlands versus West Indies at the World Cup qualifiers last year, which was, without the super over, also an incredible game. Like 370 something was the target. 374 was the target for the Netherlands. And I'm just going through this now, right? They needed 205 of the last 125 balls. I think they were 4 or 5 wickets down. Van Beek scores 20.
Teja Nidamanaru was the guy who scored
and
a ton,
Scott
right?
Edwards, right? And
Yes.
then last 2 overs, 30 to win. Van Beek scores 28. It ends in a tie. Then he comes out and just destroys West Indies, right? 30 off and over.
Yeah.
Everyone a boundary. And it basically meant that West Indies were more or less out of the World Cup. They weren't going to qualify.
Yep.
It was unbelievable hitting. I remember following that tournament very closely because obviously Sri Lanka was playing as well. And that was a game that really struck, I think, fear in the hearts of the other teams who were trying to qualify, because the type of hitting we saw that day was just incredible, right? And coming from a team like the Netherlands who haven't really shown that big hitting prowess that much, despite being involved in, like, even as an associate, been involved in like World Cups for the last 20 years, right? But they haven't really shown that type of prowess in hitting. But it was an incredible game.
Yeah, I mean, again, stakes were extremely high for that one. The Netherlands did end up qualifying for the ODI World Cup, so it was a huge win for them. The West Indies failed to qualify, so it was kind of a knockout blow. 374 runs are a lot, so let's just put that into context, right? Harare was painted orange. Logan Van Beek was the hero. That 30 runs off Jason Holder's super over, right? What was it? 4-6-4, 4-6-6, something like that. It was just insane. Then Van Beek came with the ball and took 2 wickets and ended the game. So he was the man of the hour or the month really for the Dutch. And I don't think there's been as dominant a performance in a super over per se by one single cricketer ever. Like Logan Van Beek has that record for sure. Again, I mean, massive one. It was number 2 for me as well. I did not expect it to survive by the time the turn came back to me. And the consequences were immense.
Yeah. It was brilliant as well. The whole, again, the context is huge. The cricket leading up to it, the fact that it ended a super over was amazing. But the thing that we've not spoken about yet is how dumb West Indies were when it got to the super over. Because 10 minutes before, Alzari had to defend 9, and he had to and the first ball went for 4. He had to defend 5 off 5 when it's 370. Everybody is getting hoofed everywhere, and he bowled tremendously well to get them to the super over. And they went, right, it's Jason Holder to bowl it. And all of us that were watching it, I work in a team of traders where we all watch cricket all the time, were going, what the hell are they doing? How is it not Alzari, who's just bowled a brilliant death over 5 minutes ago? Let him bowl again. It was crackers that they bowled Holder, and we all remember what Holder did for Rajasthan against Mumbai. Full toss, full toss, full toss, goodbye. You know, defending 16, didn't manage to last 3 balls or whatever it was. Holder is not the answer when you need to defend as few runs as possible. And then they needed to chase, what was it, 30?
Yeah.
Do you remember who opened?
Yep.
Shy Hope.
Oh,
what are you doing?
You're right.
What are you doing?
I remember that.
What are you doing? I mean, they have guys that can get 30 off and over, and none of them are called Shy Hope. I mean, even Chemo got loads of runs at the end of that game, but they had, you know, Akil. Romario's your man, isn't he? And why isn't Pooran opening? Pooran got 100 in the game.
Pooran didn't even feature.
He got a not out 100.
Yeah.
And they went Shy Hope. I mean, that was just like, we're not trying to get through. We're bowling Jason Holder, and then we're going to open the batting with Shy Hope. Absolute nonsense. And West Indies got exactly what they deserved from that.
Yeah. I mean, I completely blocked that out when I was thinking about this game, but you make a fantastic point. Even if 30 was going to be, a long shot, they set themselves up for failure, right? But yeah, I think first 2 picks kind of picked themselves. Now I'm interested to see where Rob goes with picks number 3 and 4, which are going to be his first 2 picks. So pressure is on.
Yeah, no problem. One of them's quite easy, I think, because when I thought super over, obviously you do think about the World Cup final, but I will never forget Narain to Pooran in the CPL. He bowled a maiden, and Pooran was a complete gun. It was an incredible game. I'm a huge CPL fan, and this was elite prime time. 2014 was the glory years of CPL cricket, and Trinidad were a ridiculous team. they are now on paper, but they don't perform like that. Just read some, like Evan Lewis and Nasir Jamshed opened the batting with Ross Taylor number 3. That's what I'm here for. Kevin O'Brien was in that team. Kevon Cooper, both the Bravos. You know, it was really, really fun, that team. Badri, Fiddy, you know, that was at the time, that was a T20 superstar team. And they were playing against Guyana. And Christopher Barnwell had to get them to the super over by anchoring the innings. This is a team that had Lendl Simmons, Martin Guptill, Narayan himself, who can obviously smoke it with the bat, and Neesham, who we've already spoken about ridiculously in super over chat. And Barnwell got 37 off 40, and they decided to open the batting in the super over with Barnwell, which was absolutely the wrong answer when you consider those names that I've just read out. So Barnwell and Neesham managed to get 11 off the super over that Kevon Cooper bowled, and then it was over to Narayan. Now go and watch this back after you've listened to us and commented on how amazing we are. Go and watch this super over back again. Pooran had gunned it in the game itself. He was like 40 odd off not many, doing Pooran things. I think he batted 7 back then. And Narayan absolutely ragged it, and Pooran couldn't get a bat on it. And he was dismissed off the 5th ball, which was the only ball of the whole super over that anybody connected the bat with. So it was big swing and a miss, 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 out, caught, long off. And then Taylor had a big swing and a miss, and that was the end of that. Wicket maiden, thanks for coming. That's the best bowling performance anyone's ever done in a super over. So honestly, go and watch it back, and there's no way that you could argue that it has to be in the conversation for best one ever.
No, it's a solid shout. I did have it on my list. Didn't feature all that highly for me, but I mean, the way you kind of described it, play and miss, play and a miss, play and a miss, Narayan being absolutely unplayable. We've all seen that clip somewhere, right? Yeah. For those who haven't, should go and check it out. When I rethink it, it does make sense for it to feature that higher up. So I've got no issues with that.
Yeah, it was number 3 for me as well. Just, we've never seen that, right?
I mean, a maiden, right?
A maiden and to one of the most explosive batters around.
Yeah. That's insane. And I mean, that goes on to show you what an anomaly Sunil Narayan is. Like, he is
unfortunately,
an
we couldn't pick him in our World T20 11 current.
Yes. Very, very unfortunately for Rob. But yeah, for an off-spinner to be that unplayable, I mean, you often look at his, bowling charts and his figures are binary. It's 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, whatever. This was all zeros, all dots. And this is a super over we're talking about. And Nicholas Pooran is Nicholas Pooran. So it is one of those unforgettable moments in cricket, and it checks out. Also, our first feature in franchise cricket, because we've only had internationals thus far. Okay.
Rob's got another one, right?
Yes, Rob does.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to... I remembered this one because it was the first one, and I was really excited about it. It's the first one ever in internationals. West Indies against New Zealand. And this is all the way back in Boxing Day 2008, this one. And the reason it sticks out is because think about who bowled to Chris Gale in this super over. So he opened with Xavier Marshall. I don't know if you remember him. Who did
I do.
Probably the funniest
He also
thing.
played for the USA.
There you go.
Xavier
yeah,
Marshall
he
has played for
he wasn't
two countries.
far off being in this World Cup. So I have a...
Yeah, but you don't like those people, though.
You're not allowed to play for multiple countries.
You have issues with people who have featured for multiple countries. So how is he featured in this list?
Well, because he didn't. So he got run out without facing in this super over. So he's allowed. So yeah,
nice one.
The reason why he got run out without facing is karmic retribution for playing for 2 different countries. They knew he was going to end up playing for America. So the game finished tied, and it was the first time ever they were going to have a super over, and it was really exciting. Nobody quite knew what to do, but Xavier Marshall, as a pick for the West Indies, who had plenty of hitters back in the day, just as they do now, was a bit mad. He is the guy that did possibly my favourite thing in ODI cricket history, which was when Brett Lee was bowling at him on a really spicy pitch. and Bretley was cranking it up to kind of 95 miles an hour, and he couldn't get back on Bretley, and all of a sudden Bretley overstepped. Big free hit. Now's your chance to get off the mark, Xavier, and he played the forward defence at the free hit and blocked it out. It's one of my favourite things ever. So Xavier, he will always have a place in my heart for doing that. But they could have picked Sarwan. Pollard was in that team. Do you know what I mean? They had ample opportunity to pick someone that could. Anyway, obviously they go Chris Gale facing up. And New Zealand decided to bowl Daniel Vettori to Chris Gale in a super over. You just don't bowl that kind of bowler to Chris Gale in a super over. And really funny super over. 6, like absolutely massive 6 if you watch this one back, which I did earlier. Then a comedy run out, Marshall out without facing. So now there's no room for manoeuvre for Gale, like another wicket and it's done. And he goes 6, 4, 2, which again is mad if you know Chris Gale. He got 25. And then West Indies tried to outdo New Zealand. They opened with Suleiman Ben. They had Fiddy and a really good Jerome Taylor back then. And they went Suleiman Ben just to try and make it interesting. And he went for a no ball 6 and another 6. But New Zealand, who had Brendan McCullum and many others, decided to go Jacob Oram at the time. And they ended up getting bowled out for 15. It was really funny. Everyone did everything wrong. You got Gale smoking it everywhere. Terrible selections. It had everything for me, and I remember it vividly because it was the first one and I was really excited about it, so that's why it goes in for me.
I think Rob and I have surprisingly picked the same top 4 because that was number 4 for me as well.
This made my list as well, but wasn't top 4 for me. But I like the novelty factor, first ever super over in T20Is. Would definitely fall below Narayan's wicket maiden, of course, in which he gets Puran. But interesting. I'm just happy you didn't pick the ones that I have because I don't have a lot.
You're going to run out of options.
You've kept me in the race. Estelle, you have next pick. Let's see what you got.
Okay, so I'm going with. I think this is before the World Cup, the most recent one. India versus Afghanistan, 2 super overs, 1 game.
Yes,
that's the first time it's happened. Afghanistan came back. I don't know how they won that. They needed, I think, 18 runs and over in the last 36 of the last 2 overs. Gulbadin Naib somehow got them to tie against India. And this is chasing 200 plus, right? So it was a super batting performance by Afghanistan. And then in the super over, was it 16? Yeah, 16. So Mukesh Kumar was, and I know this wasn't like India's first choice 11 playing, right? They had a few players they were trying out. 16 by Afghanistan. And then Rohit Sharma hits 2 sixers against Azmatullah. And you think, okay, it's done. But he still manages to pick up Sharma and then give away only 1 run off the next delivery. So it goes to another super over thanks to England and New Zealand in 2019. It goes to a second super over. And again, 2 wickets fall for India and they are only able to get 11, right? And from going like Afghanistan were never going to win it at 36 of the last 2. Then it seemed like they would get over the line. They didn't. Now they had a real opportunity. And what happens? First 2, I think within 3 deliveries that super over was done because Bishnoi got 2 wickets, right? So really exciting game. I think again that novelty factor, right? 2 super overs in a game, really interesting to watch, and particularly because it was a team like Afghanistan who, you want to see them do well against a big side like India. So yeah, really exciting one. I just wish they had gotten over the line the first time around.
Well, India cheated in that one.
It's the one in which Rohit did something, right?
Yeah, he cheated.
Was supposed to be. He couldn't
bat,
come
right?
out to bat again. Yeah, and then he did come out to bat again. Something along those lines.
Yeah, he retired in the first. No, sorry, he retired out in the first super over. So if you're out in the first super over, it was a really good bit of cricket that. So he retired out with 5 balls gone, so that Rinku could come in and run for him. It's like having a pinch runner. Really good thinking, really good idea. The only way that breaks down, that thinking, or it backfires, is if the super over's tied, because you're not allowed to bat in super over number 2 if you were dismissed in super over 1. And everybody forgot this, and Wright was allowed another go. So saying he cheated is a bit strong, but they got the as the ICC are wont to do in big moments, they got the laws completely wrong and let him have another go. And he did hit 10 off his first 2 balls in the second super over. That was really fun, that one. And a double super over, that has to be on the list somewhere, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was about to say, that you going for your double super over in your third pick, or that's double super over, is actually quite smart, because it gives you really good variety. And someone was going to pick that one up. It's also fairly recent. So I think for number 3, it is perfectly timed. Good job, Estelle. That was the one. Anyway, you guys have left the fun stuff for me. I have 2 picks in a row. And my second pick is going to be the most recent super over that we've had. USA versus Pakistan in the 2024 T20 World Cup. Dallas was the venue. It's actually not the most recent. I can't remember if Namibia Oman happened before this or after this, but it's got to be one of those.
Just before.
Namibia was before.
So this is the most recent super over. And it was a bizarre game. Like Pakistan and USA, they were both squaring off against each other for the first time in the format. Pakistan were playing their tournament opener. The USA had already defeated Canada at this point. And Pakistan, after being 30 for 3 in the power play, somehow managed to set a target of 160. They scored 159. And then the USA looked solid. They bossed the power play, right? Up until the 10-over mark, it looked like USA's game. And then in the last 10 overs, Pakistan pull it back dramatically. So much so that the USA needed, 21, 22 runs, something of the sort, in the final 2 overs. Then Amir bowls an amazing penultimate over. The USA require 15 in the final one. And you have Haris Rauf bowling that over, expecting that Pakistan surely have this. It becomes even more believable when it's 12 runs required off 3 deliveries. And then there's a full toss, there's a 6. And then in the end, there's just some really dodgy captaincy as well. A poor length, really terrible, terrible plans. And Aaron Jones is celebrating because the USA have taken the game to the super over. Now, context is important, of course, because this game ultimately knocked Pakistan out in the first round, the group stages, for the very first time in their decorated T20 World Cup history, as far as semi-final qualification is concerned. So it was a bit of a knockout punch. And what made this all the more hilarious, this game going to a super over was hilarious on its own. It should never have gotten there, right? And then in the super over, Mohammad Amir, who had bowled terrifically with the older ball, in the regular innings, gets a newer nut and completely botches the plan. Like, it's wide after wide after wide. The USA batters are running, on each of those wides. Rizwan is fumbling at the back. It's chaos central, as is so frequently the case with Pakistan cricket. And the USA end up with 18 runs or 17 runs, something like that, in that super over. And they scored 1 boundary, which is, ridiculous. I feel like that on its own makes this entire ordeal very iconic. And of course, every brown dad's dream, Saurabh Netravalkar comes and bowls the super over for the USA. And he executes his plans pretty well. It's wide Yorkers, which I feel like Pakistan's bowlers completely forgot existed, right? And it was a game in which USA actually dominated for like a good 35 overs. Pakistan only came back towards the very end of the second innings from a position where they really should have won it, but then they bottled it. And then the USA completely, smashed them in the super overs because of Pakistan's own indiscipline. That's what made this even more special, that had those wides not, been there, maybe their 12 to 13 runs would have been enough, or at the very least, they could have forced another super over. But so was not the case. And I feel like as far as iconic super overs go, history will look back at this one and laugh.
Yeah, I mean, the context is essential, right? To understand. I mean, you spoke of it from a Pakistani perspective, but if you look at it from a US perspective, an associate country making it through to the Super 8s, put into a group with, let's not forget, 3 test playing nations, right?
Yes.
So they're managing to get through that, all hinged on that super over, right? And that result. So just an incredible result for them. They did almost try to blow it, but got through in the end.
I mean, it is immense, right? That super over will be etched into, the golden pages of US cricket history. Has to be. They will never forget it. John Boy will talk about it, to his grandkids. Has to. All right, then. I still have another pick.
It's a good shout, that one. It was so I was trading that game, and when you trade a game that ends in a tie, no matter how good your position is, you have to give all the money back. So tough. It was very, very frustrating. But then the market went back up. So you see all these different win predictors, and most of them are absolute nonsense, the win predictors. They're just numbers plucked out of the sky. But the biggest betting market in the whole world thought that the USA were a 22% chance to win that Super Over. A 1-over game when the USA were the best in all phases of that cricket match. And they had clearly the best hitter on show that day.
Absolutely.
And didn't they go Ifti, Pakistan? Didn't Iftikhar open?
Yeah, so they had this weird thing where Saurabh Netravalkar, a left-arm seamer, was bowling that Super Over. And they sent Fakhr, a left-handed batter, who is one of those very few batters with that hitting pedigree or big boy power in Pakistan's ranks, and is a southpaw.
Yeah.
So he would kill the angle of Netravalkar. He was at the non-strikers end.
It, yeah.
Fakhr did not face a single delivery in that Super Over. Ifti did.
It's
and then
absolutely
Ifti got out to a
ridiculous.
full toss.
And they thoroughly deserve to lose that because of what they... So most of the ones that I've picked here stuck in my brain because they did ridiculous things with the batting and bowling order. Like, well, how did this guy bowl it and how did this guy open? But I was... I'd actually backed USA to win the Super Over because it was never 22%. I was loving it when Iftikhar took strike. I was like, well, what are they doing? They can't do this now. You obviously go Fakhr there.
Yeah. And also, if you guys remember, Pakistan took like 15 minutes to come out to bat. I was worried they would get timed out, right? That's how long they were taking. They clearly had no planning around what they were supposed to do in this sort of situation. And I think they were completely rattled at the start of that game. That kind of, came back to haunt them in the Super Over as well. They finished that game the way they started it. And in the middle, they played some decent cricket in patches. But absolutely, you were completely right when you say that the USA bossed that game. All three departments and pretty much like 80% of that game. So I think that is a pretty good shout for number 2. Number 3 is tricky. And I'm going to go with another T20 World Cup game, but I'm going all the way back to 2012. And this was a match played in the Super 8 stage between the West Indies and New Zealand. Yep. It was at Palakele, Kandy. And the West Indies had made, 139 in the first innings, which, in that T20 World Cup was quite a decent score, a winning total on many an occasion. And Ross Taylor was the hero for New Zealand. He scored an unbeaten 62. He helped New Zealand get to 139. Otherwise, they were toast, right? He was literally that one-man show in their batting order. And again, the West Indies, I suppose, are notorious for making really, really weird decisions in the Super Over. So Marlon Samuels bowled this one. He also bowled the final over of that game. And in the Super Over, they brought him on ahead of Sunil Narayan, who in that same game, by the way, had figures of 3 for 20 and bowled the penultimate over of that game as well, gave away 3 runs. So Narayan did not bowl the Super Over. Marlon Samuels did.
And they had Badri.
Someone who is a part-timer. Yeah, they had Badri too. So they went with Samuels ahead of those two guys and really should have lost this one. But God is cruel when it comes to New Zealand and Super Overs. There is nothing that you can convince me of otherwise. When it's New Zealand playing a Super Over, you can bet your bottom dollar that they will find a way to lose it, even if Marlon Samuels is bowling that Super Over, right? But anyway, he conceded 17 runs, all right? And at this point, you're thinking, surely New Zealand have this one in the bucket. Like in a game where both teams managed to score 139, 17 runs in a solitary over is going to be too much of a challenge, even if you've got your Gales or whatever. But Tim Southee bowls a no ball up front and Gale smashes it for a 6. So all of a sudden now, you're looking at 11 runs in 6 deliveries and the game's equation has completely changed. Interestingly enough, it was Marlon Samuels who sealed that game with a 6 in the Super Over on the 5th delivery. And New Zealand were knocked out as a result of this defeat as well. And the context was very, very peculiar. Seldom do we ever see a Super 8 stage. I mean, I remember it happened in 2010 when Pakistan sneaked through on net run rate. But this was a similar story in this one. Sri Lanka had won all of their games, right? And had New Zealand defeated the West Indies in the Super Over, they would have been the semi-finalists ahead of the West Indies and England on net run rate because they had the best net run rate. But because the West Indies won this game, they went ahead on points and New Zealand were knocked out, could not win a single game in the Super 8 stage. Whereas there's another game as well that might feature from this particular stage in that World Cup. But I mean, we've spoken about context many times. I think this particular Super Over had that because it was a virtual quarterfinal in many ways, right? And the West Indies were eventual champions, so it would have been a butterfly effect. Had New Zealand, won that Super Over, maybe Sri Lanka would have lifted the title or some other team would have lifted the title. Who knows? But that's what makes the sport beautiful. Marlon Samuels bowls the Super Over and West Indies still managed to win. He seals the game with a 6. Saudi bowls a no ball. Too much drama. Far too much drama for an elimination game. And I think this was the most obvious candidate for my number 3 pick. I couldn't think of anything else ahead of it.
Actually, I was thinking, have New Zealand ever won a super over game? They've been in so many.
They have. Yes.
And it seems like they always end up in the losing side.
So I can check this. I can actually do a quick check on this. New Zealand lose. They've lost 2 more. They've lost another. They have never won a Super Over.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they've been in the most number, if I'm not mistaken, they've been in the most number of Super Overs amongst international teams, right? Surely.
Even their women have not won a Super Over. Okay, so this is insane. But yeah, I mean, it's funny how many Super Overs we've seen in World Cup cricket, no? They're quite a lot.
Yep.
Yes, pressure.
It is interesting. But anyway, those are my 2 picks. I think, Estelle, it's back to you, and
I'm
then Rob
next.
has 2 more.
Yeah, so
Yep. Go for it.
it's funny you did actually mention it. I'm going for the game before that for New Zealand, Sri Lanka, New Zealand. Again, that could have had an impact on where the tournament went in the end, right? And this was a game that Lasith Malinga really got to shine in that Super Over. He hadn't had a great tournament playing at home. Conditions weren't that great for batting. But even in low-scoring games, he hadn't had the best of tournaments and it would end quite horribly for him. But in this Super Over, New Zealand just couldn't do anything, right? He had 2 buys, 1, then he got Guptill out and 1 off the last delivery. And New Zealand were chasing only 13 that Sri Lanka were able to get to. So it wasn't a massive total to go after. And even with first couple of deliveries not going for boundaries, you still thought there was a chance. But Malinga just shut the door on New Zealand.
Yeah, it was a really interesting game because I felt that, 174 in Palekele, New Zealand did extremely well to get there in the first place. And had it not been for Dilshan's 76, Sri Lanka would not have drawn level. They would have lost that game, surely. And then, interestingly enough, New Zealand had actually defended 8 runs in the final over of regular time. They had to defend or chase down 14 in the Super Over to win, but they gave away more runs in the Super Over than they did in the actual last over of the game. So they had multiple opportunities to win it. Also, you're looking at peak Malinga, right? Forget how that tournament ended for him. But in the build-up to that final, he was as Malinga as we've ever seen him, right? That 2 to 4 year period in between in the early 2010s, or maybe starting from the late noughties, I feel like that was when Malinga was at his absolute best. He'd also played some IPL by this time as well, so honed his skills even more. And he completely owned New Zealand in that Super Over. Even though Sangakkara made some errors behind the stumps. I remember he dropped a catch, he gave away some buys.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things were happening, but still, Sri Lanka, they pulled through. And again, another World Cup, T20 World Cup Super Over game. Funnily enough, both of those games for New Zealand came in the same Super 8 stage, and they could have won both of them.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
For them.
No, I think they had England in between.
Okay.
But they just needed to win the West Indies one. And in another parallel universe or something, they would have won both those Super Overs. And they would have
every
progressed
other
to the
Super Over
semis.
they've played, right?
Yes. In that parallel universe, New Zealand have never lost a Super Over, ever. Right? That's probably how it goes. Okay, then. 2 picks for you, Rob.
Yeah, I'm scraping the barrel a bit now.
He's probably going to go for a Vitality Blast one.
No,
I can feel it in my bones.
No, the thing about the Blast, and I really do want to talk about some of the ties that I've been to, but they didn't settle with super overs. Like I've been to a tied bowl off. That was amazing. It took an hour between the match finishing and the bowl off starting because nobody knew what the rules were. And that was really funny. That was Surrey in the quarterfinal 05. That was great, but I can't talk about that now because it didn't finish in a super over. I'm going to go Champions League because it was a funny one. And when you mentioned super overs, this is one that did stick in my head. And this probably tells you more about me than the game because it's a very weird one to stick in my head. But I looked it up and it was Trinidad against New South Wales. And Trinidad didn't have any of or a lot of their guns weren't playing, like Pollard wasn't playing, Russell wasn't around. This is 2011 and it was at Chennai. Like, what happened to the Champions League? It was awesome. It was such a great tournament. I want that back. Like, we endure a lot of crap T20 franchise cricket through the year. Get rid of most of them and get the Champions League back because it was amazing. But yeah, Trinidad got 139 without most of their stars. And the New South Wales team was a joke. Warner, Watson, Smith, Katic, Rohrer when he was good, Moses when he was good. And the bowling had Stuart Clark in it, who was okay at T20s, Pat Cummins, Mitchell Stark, Steve O'Keefe.
Wow.
Just nonsense, like proper. That bowling attack was ridiculous at that level. Anyway, it finished a tie, obviously, 139 all. And they went Moses opened the batting in that team that I just read out, which is a bit crazy. And O'Keefe bowled to Lendl Simmons. And there was lots of nonsense in the super over. That's why I remembered it. Rampal to Moses, starts with a dot, then 2, then he just lost his mind, Ravi Rampal, and just bowled full toss after full toss. And all Moses had to do was hit the ball. Like, he bowled mid-wicket was inside the circle, mid-on inside the circle. So he bowls a length ball on Midland leg and he just flicked it over for 4. So yeah, it went 2, 4, 4, 4, 4. And back in the day, 18 was absolutely loads for a super. We're talking 13 years ago here. And so they go O'Keefe to Simmons and Barath. And they needed to, so basically all sorts of nonsense. It shouldn't have been Barath and Simmons anyway. 1, 1, 2, and they're like, it's done. They need 18. Then Simmons hits a massive 6. Then O'Keefe loses his mind. Then there's a wide. Then there's a misfield 4. And then all of a sudden they need 4 to win. And O'Keefe is bowling to Simmons, who tries to smash it straight out the ground. 4 would have been fine. And it was one of those balls where it's like, where do you want to hit it? And it was tossed up. And Simmons couldn't resist trying to win it with a 6. And Warner, who I'll come back to in the next one I've picked, took a really good catch on the rope to defend it and win them the game off the last ball. It was a really exciting super over. There's basically no context to it. It was a random Champions League game from 13 years ago. But the reason why I remember it is because the super over itself was really fun. Loads of mad stuff happened in it.
Yeah, that does sound like a wild one. I have not watched this game, but I remember the Champions League and I remember it being weird that way. It's interesting how good both of those teams were as well in the early years, New South Wales and Trinidad. They were proper T20 teams before franchise cricket. And they are still hubs, right? At least Trinidad is. You get so many amazing talents from there. But I like that the Champions League is featured in this list. So thanks for the diversity, Rob. And give us your number 4 pick as well.
Yeah, this really is scraping the barrel. But the I'll go with another little-known tournament for you. This is called the Indian Premier League, which some people will know about its existence. And this was funny because Axar Patel opened the bowling in it. This was a Delhi against SRH game. Again, I remembered it because I was going to win absolutely loads of money on it, whoever won, and then it finished a tie in farcical circumstances, so I had to give it all back. That's why I remembered it. And the super over was Aksar Patel Madley. Let me just look at the players that were playing in this game.
What year was this?
This was only about 3 years ago, so they should know better. It's pretty sure Darwan, Pant, Steve Smith, Hetmeyer and Stoinis. That was a decent top six. And they had
2021.
Yeah. They had Aksar, Ashwin, Rabada, Avesh Khan, and Amit Mishra to choose from, basically. And so they went Aksar. And the Sunrisers team was when Warner and Bairstow were opening and Kane Williamson number 3. And don't get me started on Kane Williamson. And that was when Abhishek was a bad number 6. Anyway, the super over was Aksar to Warner and Williamson. Kane Williamson batted in the super over. Just take that one sentence and think about what I just said then. Kane Williamson batted in the super over. So that negates the fact that they're bowling Aksar, and it went for 7. They got 7 off the super over. And the funny thing was David Warner got done for a short run off the last ball of the super over, and he was really, really angry about it. I remember that, and that made me very happy at the time. And then Rashid Khan Rashid Khan, correct answer, has to defend 7, and Rishabh Pant's on strike. It was Pant and Darwan. And this is how it goes. He went for 6 off his first 3 balls, and he's facing Pant, who's just reverse swept him for 4, and he has to bowl. He can only give up 1 more run, and he went massive leggy that Pant couldn't get anywhere near. Then there was a huge LBW appeal, and during that LBW appeal, they ran the leg by, which obviously we've seen that in this World Cup, haven't we? If the finger would have gone up, then Bangladesh will tell you all about that. I mean, how hasn't that law changed yet? Probably because it hasn't happened to India yet. And so they needed 1 off the last ball, and they got one of those. The ball hit the pad again, and they scampered the single, and the fielders were everywhere. So this brings lots of things to mind for me. One is Warner was really upset, which is always good. That was really funny. Warner was really angry because he got done for the short run, and then they'd won it by that. But the other thing, and this happens so often, not just in super overs, but when cricket matches get close, is teams do not set the correct fields. And this happens time and time again when teams are defending 1 or 2 off the last ball, get at least 1 person near the stumps at both ends, don't have the wicketkeeper wearing 2 gloves, and don't have him standing 15 yards back. He must be up to the stumps, or at least quite close. Get your field right, get your fielders dialed in, because if you go through, which we're almost doing now, if you go through every super over that's ever happened, loads of them finish with a scampered run off the last ball. World Cup final did, Guptill got run out. Loads of them finish with the diving in and fielders panicking. We had the who was it the other day? Nepal against South Africa, where just a tiny bit of a breather before the last ball of that game, when we would be talking about another super over right now. It's just all you have to do, whatever happens, and you know this to be a fact, you definitely run as fast as you can down the other end. It's the only thing that you definitely do on this ball. No matter what happens, you run as fast as you can to the other end. And he didn't run as fast as he could to the other end. It hit at least it hit himself, ricocheted to a fielder, and then he got run out, and he could have been halfway back for the second by the time he got run out. So people don't think properly in super overs or when cricket games get tight, and this is one of those where nobody was thinking properly. All sorts of stuff was happening, but it's not going to win, is it, in this conversation of best super overs ever? But it was a really funny one.
I mean, it's the first IPL entry in our list, and we have quite a few locked down already. I think the whole bizarre element of both teams trying to lose the super over makes it an interesting one. Them bowling Akshar and then Hyderabad saying, okay, maybe Kane can go have a bat. There's a lot of stuff going on over there, plus that whole short run thing that you just explained. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want drama. We want people to completely lose their shit and do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. And I think it fits the bill, Rob. I think you've got a nice, diverse little list over here, whereas it's like I have 3 World Cup games, so it's not diverse at all, but then the stakes are high for those. Estelle now has her 4th pick, so let's see what she goes for.
Yeah, so I'm going with a women's game. Australia versus India at the DY Patel. In terms of context, it doesn't have massive context of like a big tournament or qualification or anything like that. But it was at a period where Australia were they still are, but nearly impossible to beat, right? 2022. And that series ended 4-1 in favor of Australia. The only game that India were able to win was the one they took to the super over. Australia made 187 for one. So you always you wondered whether they'd left some runs out there because they'd lost only one wicket, right? And India seemed out of it before Risha Ghosh. She's like we've spoken about in previous episodes as well, one of the best wicket-keeper batters in the women's game right now. Then we come to the super over, and it was another high-scoring one, right? You don't see a lot of, totals of 180 plus in the women's game, or at that time you didn't. And then the super over went for 16. India was able to get, not 16, 20 runs. Risha Ghosh again coming out there, 6 off the first ball, dismissed off the next. And then Smriti Mandana gets 10 or 11 off the last 4 deliveries. Australia chasing 20, got 3 boundaries, 116, but finished with only 16. So that was their only loss in that series that ended 4-1.
Yeah, it definitely made the headlines, and for 20 runs to be scored in that game, the Super Over was quite immense on its own, right? And Australia gave it a proper go as well. So it was on my long list, but I'm glad that you didn't pick the ones that were on my shorter list, which I will go ahead and just snap up now because I have my 2 final picks.
Yep.
Anything you'd like to add before that, Rob?
No, I agree, and that was a memorable one as well. Just and we didn't expect that kind of hitting to happen in that super over. And when you see, and obviously women's cricket is coming on leaps and bounds in front of our eyes every time we watch it, but the skills now of the rope clearing abilities that some of these ladies have got is seriously impressive. And that was a good showcase for the women's game that day.
All right then, 2 picks coming up for me. One of them is a bit personal. It's just a story of young Behram and how he was super excited watching that game. This was Pakistan versus Australia back in 2012. Australia were touring the UAE and Pakistan were 1-0 up in the 3-match series. And, even back in those days, after Australia were, this was post-Ponting and that era. But Pakistan still didn't win much versus Australia. So they were up 1-0 in that series, and the game that is in question was being played in Dubai, a ground which has been a happy hunting ground for Pakistan. And they scored 151 in the first innings, the home team. And 151 was like Pakistan's staple, first innings total back in that day. And you'd often back them to defend it as well because they had that spin bowling combo of Ajmal and Afridi. They had Umar Gul, who was at his peak, and a bunch of other people in and out as well. And this game was interesting because Australia were bossing the chase at one point. George Bailey was in complete control, and the Aussies needed 10 runs in the final over to seal the game, and they had 4 wickets in hand with an in-form Bailey who had strike. Pakistan do something completely outside of the box. They give that final over to Abdul Razak, who hasn't bowled all game. This man has not bowled a single over in this game. And we're watching this game. I remember I'm 18, and I'm like, I'm not sure that was the way to go. This guy hasn't bowled a single delivery and you've given him like the last over to defend 10 runs. And 10 runs, even in that day, wasn't a massive number. You'd think that 10 runs would probably get chased down in the final over. And Razak goes on and, dismisses Bailey first ball. So now Australia are on the back foot. And ultimately, they score 9 runs in that over and Razak takes 2 wickets. So the man tasked with defending 10 took 2 for 9. In his final over, which was amazing. And then, add to that Bailey's wicket. That was like pure elation and emotion as a young teenage fan. Because, like I said, I wasn't really used to experiencing a victory over Australia all too frequently. So it just felt all the more special. And then when Australia scored, 11 runs off Umar Gul in the super over, things got a bit, tense again. Can Pakistan chase, 12? Because Pakistan could be tasked with chasing 4 runs in the super over and you'd be tense. That's just how they play their cricket, right? So 12 still seemed quite a large number. But then Razak came out to bat as well, along with Umar Akmal. They both got a boundary each. And I remember 2 runs were required of the final delivery, and Pat Cummins bowled a wide. And then they just took a single off the final delivery. So that's how Pakistan won that game. It was dramatic. The celebrations were dramatic. They had taken an unassailable 2-0 lead in the series, which they would go on to win 2-1. And at that time, I mean, you look back and you think, bilateral T20s, who gives a shit, right? No one does anymore. But back in the day, it did mean something. At least that series meant something to young Behram. And so, which is why I've gone with a personal sort of pick for number 4. I know some people will slander me in the comments section, but I honestly couldn't give less of a fuck. You can go ahead and say what you want to say. This is Crickpicks, and I'm going to pick the ones that I want to. All right. Last pick for me. This is objective. Trust me when I say that. It is a women's game. It also features Pakistan and it features New Zealand as well. And as we mentioned before, New Zealand have never managed to win a super over, men or women. But this was a game which, was in the direct aftermath of Pakistan becoming the first Asian side to defeat New Zealand in a T20I series in their own backyard. So the White Ferns had been defeated 2-1, largely thanks to Fatma Sana and her genius. It was huge. And Pakistan's women were on a high. They lost the first 2 ODIs in the series. And in the third game at the Hagley Oval in Christchurch, is it or is it Dunedin? I think it might be Dunedin. Hagley Oval.
Hagley.
Yes. It's one of those two. It's Christchurch or Dunedin. I cannot remember right now.
Christchurch.
Christchurch.
Oval.
It's Christchurch, yeah. So I was right. The Susie Bates Arena or Oval might be in Dunedin. Or it might not be. Maybe my knowledge is all over the place right now. But New Zealand scored a more than healthy 251 in the first innings, right? And you'd think that, whitewash looming. Surely Pakistan have lost this game and they were already 2-0 down. They defeated New Zealand in the T20s, but this ain't happening. Like, they can't win this. History also suggested the same. In the 16 ODIs that these two teams had squared off against each other in, Pakistan had come out victorious once in Sharjah in 2017, which was, over 6 years ago, because this game took place in late 2023. So, no hopes whatsoever. Pakistan go out and they bat extremely well. Bisma Maroof, who has now recently retired, she scored 68. There were contributions all around the park. And then the game was tied, which on its own was an achievement. But Pakistan were in a position to win it. So it felt like they had bottled it, right? Because they needed to go at, 7 runs and over in the last 3, which with wickets in hand, you take. You'd be like, okay, this is chaseable. Even in women's cricket, I mean, that is, very, very gettable. And Pakistan somehow managed to just be able to tie the game. And then Alia Riaz, who was in great hitting touch, she helped Pakistan score 11 runs off Amelia Kerr in the super over. Amelia had bowled brilliantly in the penultimate over of the regular game. She'd taken wickets as well. So 11 runs off Amelia Kerr in the super over was a high on its own. But then Sadia Iqbal bowled a really, really memorable over, because first she removed Amelia, who was the informed batter in that game as well, had scored 77, highest scorer in the game. First she removed her, then Sophie Devine hits her for a 6. So all of a sudden now New Zealand are back into the fold. And anything can happen. A single shot separates both teams, and Sadia Iqbal removed Sophie Devine next delivery after conceding that 6. And that was the first time Pakistan's women ever won an ODI game in New Zealand, which I think was huge. And I feel like the context of this might only be restricted to bilateral cricket, but Pakistan's women's team is not one which has enjoyed great resources and great facilities. It lacks structure. They're not even given proper infrastructure. I've gone and viewed a few games, personally in the domestic circuit. It's club cricket level. That's how bad it is. It's really poorly managed. And for them to go and defeat the White Ferns in their own backyard in a format that isn't just 20 overs, you need to be consistently good for large chunks of the game to beat them. And then winning the game in the super over, I feel like it was one of the most storied, victories in the history of Pakistan women's cricket. Of course, they'd won the T20I series, which was bigger, but this was a super over and they needed to get that monkey off their back. And weirdly enough, they've regressed since, but at that point, it felt like they would be charting new heights.
Actually, context-wise, that could prove to be a really important match in the end, because New Zealand are kind of on the brink of not getting automatic qualification for the World Cup, right?
True.
So that loss to Pakistan could actually end up being, I mean, they could still go through, but it's kind of between them and a couple of other teams right now to get that last couple of spots for qualification. So context-wise, it was an important game as well.
That's true. It might turn out to be bigger than it originally seemed.
Yeah.
Fair point. All right, wrap it up, Estelle. Last pick for you.
My last one.
Is it? Yes, it is.
Yes. I'm really glad that we've reached my last pick and there are still a few supers on the table because I didn't expect there to be that many. I have a couple of choices. I'm going to go with one that doesn't really have a lot of context but was interesting in the sense that there were 2 back-to-back super overs and again heartbreak for New Zealand. It was a 5-match series against India. India tour of New Zealand in 2020.
There were 2 super overs in that 5-match series. I remember that.
And
it was also not too long after the final, right? The 2019 final.
So January 2020. Yeah. So I just think they were very similar super overs as well, if I'm not mistaken. Like New Zealand really had a chance, and I remember watching this again. It's one of the more memorable ones because I remember because the games were in the morning. I was at office and everyone was around the TV watching this game, and both times, you thought New Zealand were right there. Surely this is the time they win their first super over.
Okay, so sorry to interject. There has been some misinformation on my part. They have won a super over in their history, yes. Back in 2010 in Christchurch, New Zealand won a super over versus Australia. So could have won their second ever super over.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, then not as high stakes as I originally thought. But yeah, heartbreaking 2 games back-to-back, the third T20 and the fourth one. So I'm going with the fourth one. Because obviously it would have been more disappointing. And it was Tim Southee, right? Bowling both super overs. Check out who batted for India, though. KL Rahul and Virat Kohli. Batting the super over, chasing 13. And they got there in 5 deliveries.
Wow. All right, then. That just has to be very, very New Zealand of them, right? And I've got the record over here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In 10 attempts in super overs across formats and across genders, they have won a single game.
Wow.
Which was against Australia. So at least they have that. They've got that one game over their Trans-Tasman rivals. So KL Rahul and Kohli scored or chased down 13 in the super over. Nice one. All right, so that wraps up your 5. And Rob, I believe it's just you now who's left. So kill it off and then we'll have 15 super overs.
Have I just got one more?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've just got one more.
Thank goodness for that. So this one is another IPL one. Sorry, but it is. It was absolutely impossible that it became a super over, and then it was absolute box office when it was the super over because it was Bumrah to Kohli and AB, and that is what you want if you're picking people to watch. Bumrah defending about 7, I think it was, but Mumbai needed 110 in 37 balls. This is about 4 years ago. And they had very little chance of getting that many. It's such a long period of time to score 17, 18 and over 4. And it was Ishan Kishan's best IPL knock. And Pollard went absolutely mental and took Zampa and Chahal down. And they needed like 22 and then they needed 19. And all of a sudden they reeled it in. Udana is not a man who you'd want to bowl the last over. This is when Bangalore's policy was, we just need to make sure that we've got De Villiers and Kohli and everyone else can just do other stuff. So they had Finch, Kohli, De Villiers, Dubé, amazingly. Anyway, talking about who should bowl in the super over, this was another really funny one. they had, this is their, I'm going to use the word attack, but I don't mean it. This was their bowling attack from that day. Udana, who'd gone for 45 from his 4, which is quite good. Navdeep Saini, who is in the conversation for worst death bowlers on planet Earth, he'd gone for 43 in his. Chahal had been hammered by Pollard and so had Zampa, so they'd gone for 48 and 53. They had one bowler, Washington Sundar, who miraculously went for 1 for 12 in his 4 overs. So one of them went for 3 and over, and all the rest went for about 12 or at least 11. So you know where I'm going with this. Saini bowls the super over, which is impossible. I think I'd have gone Udana before I went Saini. So he's bowling to Pollard, who's just got 60 off 25 or something. And Pollard can't land a bat on him. And for some reason, Mumbai don't go Kishan, who's just played his best knock ever in the IPL and got 99. They went Hardik. I'm not going to start talking about Hardik because we've been on for quite a while and we've all got homes to go to. Somehow, Saini concedes 7 off the super over. That's impossible. That's due about 16, that over. And then it's over to Bumrah against de Villiers, who got absolutely loads and then kept in blazing heat, and Kohli. And Bumrah was on one and they just couldn't land a bat on it. There was a wicket that was reviewed and then de Villiers got a lucky top edge and they managed to scramble singles and they needed and Kohli put Bumrah away for a boundary off the last ball to get them home. And that was just one where it's like the crowd are going berserk. It's Bangalore against Mumbai. They both got 200. Mumbai came back from absolutely nowhere. AB got runs. He got 50 off 20 or something. Kohli's there, Bumrah's there. It was just all the big names, 200 aside. It was like one of those cinema, like popcorn type super overs. It's not one that's going to live long in the memory, but it was fun, if nothing else, and it had all the big names in it.
Yeah, I mean, Bumrah versus Kohli and AB is as box office as things can get, particularly in the IPL, but also in world cricket, right? I think it's a good enough entrant. And that also wraps up our 15 super overs that we've chosen. Yeah. I'll repeat our top 5. And of course, to all of our viewers and listeners, let us know in the comment section who wins this. I will repeat everyone's picks. And also let us know what we missed out on.
Yeah.
Which super overs did we forget and which ones are the ones that you feel we should have included? Do let us know about those ones. Anyway, I started this one. So picks for Behram were 2019 ODI World Cup final, USA versus Pakistan in the 2024 T20 World Cup, West Indies versus New Zealand in the Super 8 stage of the 2012 T20 World Cup, Pakistan versus Australia bilateral series in 2012, and Pakistan's women versus New Zealand's women in 2023. Then Rob had Trinidad versus Guyana in the CPL 2014. The Sunil Narayan wicket maiden versus Nicholas Pooran. And then he had West Indies versus New Zealand first ever super over in T20 internationals. He had a Champions League game which featured Trinidad and New South Wales in 2011, which featured a lot of stars in that New South Wales team. And IPL, he had Delhi versus Hyderabad as his 4th pick, which is a game that occurred in 2021. And he wrapped it up with another IPL game, RCB versus Mumbai in IPL 2020 when Bumrah took on Kohli and AB in the super over and AB and Kohli won. That was in Dubai 2020. And Estelle finally had West Indies versus the Netherlands in the ODI World Cup qualifiers in 2023, an iconic game. She also had Afghanistan versus India, the recent game in which there were 2 super overs, the double super over game, in which Rohit had that whole retired out controversy. She also had Sri Lanka versus New Zealand in the Super 8 stage of the 2012 World T20. And then she wrapped it up with India's women versus Australia's women in the DIY Patil Stadium in 2022, along with India versus New Zealand in 2020 in a game where, what was it, Kohli and KL Rahul were opening or batting for India and New Zealand failed to chase the score, something like that. So yeah, that wraps up our list. As I said earlier, do let us know who wins this and what we missed out on. That'll be it for this particular episode of Crickpicks. And just a quick reminder, if you guys go to goodareas.co, you can bookmark that webpage, and that can prove to be your one-stop shop for all the work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, videos, or podcasts. And we'll catch you next week with another episode of Crickpicks. Jared will be back for that. So thank you, Rob, for filling in as an Impact sub. We definitely enjoyed your company.
No worries, guys.
And thanks a bunch. Also, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Keep watching our content. We'll be back next week with another episode of Crickpicks. That'll be all for now. Goodbye.
If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now.